Joining me today is the outgoing mayor of Framingham, Framingham's first mayor, Dr. Yvonne Spicer. She took office January 1st, 2018, when Framingham first became a city, and she's here today, just days before her term comes to an end on January 1st, 2022. Welcome, Mayor Spicer. It's so wonderful to have you here today, and there's so much to talk about. It's been 4 years, and how does it feel to be at the end of your reign as Framingham's first mayor?
You know, there's a bit of bittersweetness to it. I would have to say it has been a tremendous journey. I mean, to start a new city, to create a new city, first in itself is a daunting task. And certainly over the last several years to be plagued with our COVID pandemic as well as racial upheaval, it has been a very trying time. But I'm very proud of how we have navigated through this pandemic, through some challenges around racial upheaval, and also some of the challenges of forming a new city. So I walk away with my head high and my shoulders back and feeling pretty proud of the work we've been able to accomplish.
Are you sad?
You know, I'm sad, but I'm hopeful. Because the thing that I believe in strongly is that the people of Framingham are very resilient, and yes, I knew it would be challenging taking this job on, and it has been very challenging, and sometimes some of the challenges were somewhat unnecessary. And I look and I say, despite those challenges, we still have been able to make some good progress. And sometimes it's 2 steps forward and 1 step back. And we've done what we can to move our city forward, to put Framingham on the map. And I'm pretty proud of that fact, that I've been instrumental in putting Framingham on the map and making it a global city and worldwide known. So.
Are there things that you had hoped to continue to work on that you now are get kind of a little remorseful that you won't be able to work on them going forward?
Yeah, well, it's not so remorseful, because I also know everything is a part of a process, and part of the process of, first of all, creating something new. And sometimes you try something and it works really well, and then sometimes you try something and it's not so great, and you have to come back and get back to the drawing board. And that's how we make progress on things in life, throughout life, is that you have to try something and be willing to fail at it.
Well, that's true, but I'm sure you had some initiatives underway that you would have liked to have seen through.
Yes. Well, there are few, and there still can be, continued on as I pass the baton. I've talked about some of them. Economic development is going to be critical, and driving that is, how do we attract new businesses to our community? How do we continue to attract new people to come and live and work and play in our community? These are some real important factors that I'd like to see continue. And even during the pandemic, several new businesses opened in Framingham. I was pretty proud of that.
Yes, people tend to focus on those that closed, but there were many that opened as well.
Absolutely.
You got to really look at both sides of the equation. Now, you mentioned in your earlier comment that some of the challenges you faced were unnecessary. What do you mean by that?
Well, I think some of the challenges, that I faced had to do with, working with funding with the council, and, having budgets cut unnecessarily. And I think this has been a particularly trying year to have the funding for our HR director ending at the December. And of course, which is a signal to someone that, there will not be any resources for your job to continue.
Is that why she left?
Yes. Yes, it was.
Because she knew that the funding was ending in December?
Absolutely.
She wasn't sure whether it was going to come back?
Exactly. And that was disheartening, because, we had a wonderful HR director that has done tremendous work and worked side by side with me over the last couple of years to make some significant changes in policies within our work environment, hiring policies, helping me locate and find a diversity, equity, and inclusion officer. So that was a huge loss. And of course, our economic development director, that was another difficult space. To eliminate the funding for that position really set economic growth back.
Did those cuts actually help the finances of the city?
Well, they weren't. They were not financial cuts, and I don't see it as helping the financial situation, because we weren't in a difficult situation. The only difficulty that we've had is our water and sewer deficit, and that is the only and which is being shored up using ARPA funding. Other than that, people have paid their taxes. Something like 99% of our residents have paid their taxes over the last several years. So we were not in a financial crunch as it relates to needing to cut those positions. And certainly those would not be positions I would cut because they are critical to the maintenance and managing of any city.
So do you think those funds will be restored once you're
Well, once the mayor-elect, I have admonished him to ask for funding to be restored. I saw those as unnecessary cuts. I saw not paying for our membership to professional organizations like the Massachusetts Municipal Association, which has been unbelievably pivotal during these last 2 years in getting good information about what's happening in our state, talking with epidemiologists and infectious disease specialists, all of that being orchestrated by this professional organization. So our dues, our membership dues, basically more than paid for itself. It was absolutely invaluable.
How much were those dues?
$16,000, and that includes, that's for the whole city of Framingham. So it's not just the mayor's office, it's the entire city. How
did you explain that cut to the MMA when you had to cancel the membership?
It was a very difficult conversation, and was met with shock and awe, because as a new city, as the only city that isn't a member of the MMA, it just was very, very short-sighted.
Okay. When you're at the top of an organization, when you stepped in to be the mayor, I mean, who shows you and helps you get acclimated to the organization and the job itself?
Yeah. Well, the one thing I want to stress is that I came into this job with over 20 years of leadership experience, and starting working at the Museum of Science and as a vice president in a startup division of the museum. It didn't exist, and so being able to take an organization from a $5 million operation to over $50 million by the time I left the museum, showed that I had some experience working from the ground up.
Sure. And being a mayor is a whole different ball game, right?
Well, being a mayor, once again, all of those skills came into play that I had earned over the course of my professional career. People skills. People skills are critical to this job, and being able to build those relationships with people near and far who have done this work, and certainly over the last several years, I don't care how long you've been a mayor, how much experience you've had, no one has ever dealt with a pandemic in the middle of their term, and also with racial upheaval thrown in there as well. And so we work together as mayors and town managers across the state, supporting one another, sharing resources, helping locate resources like PPE. Those were the things that were invaluable to me, especially over the last couple of years.
Was the biggest challenge working with people, with you in the public or with you in the council? Where was the biggest challenge working with people?
First of all, I am a people person, and one of the things that I ran a campaign on, being the people's mayor and being the mayor of all of the people. What that means to me, it's not just a slogan, it's being able to understand those that are struggling, to those that are contributing, to our community in a way that exceeds their dollars and using their dollars to better our community. Understanding the business community, and what they might need, looking at education, looking at our medical system. All of these things come into play, and I've had experience working in all of these different realms, and knowing that it makes a difference when I show up.
I think people always said that you were so good with the public, but saw that you were having difficulties working with the council.
Yeah. Well, and it didn't have to be. It didn't have to be, because the reality is that, I'll be perfectly honest with you. I know that me being elected in this position, it was a tough decision for a lot of folks, and their candidate didn't win. And some of the folks that are on the council, their candidate didn't win, and they have spent the last 4 years tackling and battling me. I say go left, they go right, to just be contrary. So these are things, and this will be indicative of what we see happen over the next couple of months. Things they've cut out of the budget, will they restore them for the new incoming mayor?
What do you think?
Of course they will. And I also think it was a lot of deliberate effort to undermine and cripple the administration in ways that were not necessary.
Does that just get chalked up to politics?
You know, some of it does. Some of it does. And, you know, I often say to people, because I've had people come up to me in the market and say, you know, Mayor Spicer, did you do such and such? I said, no, ma'am, I did not. And I wouldn't, and here's why. And they're like, oh, why did they put that in the, you know, the blog there, you know, and talk about it on social media? I said, I'm not sure. But you know what? Trust and verify.
Trust and verify.
Trust
That's
and
good
verify.
advice. Trust
Yeah.
and verify. Was the job what you expected it to be?
You know, it's interesting because when you're the first at a particular thing, you know, I've lived in Framingham for 36 years, so I know this community fairly well. But
Sure,
when you
from
are
days of teaching,
living here, being on town meeting, I mean, so I know this community fairly well. But I also did not anticipate some of the antiquated systems that we had to address right from the beginning. You know, things that were done electronically for the last 10, 20 years are done, you know, by hand in paper. And we had to rectify a lot of those kinds of antiquated
Well, you know,
systems.
government is known for that, being really late to the game in terms of getting up to speed and up to date. So when you saw that was pretty shocking, I would imagine.
And then also looking at the leadership team, you know, and it's a great leadership team too that I've worked with over the last 4 years, and there were some things that they were not used to doing, like meeting on a regular basis, and they've been doing that for the last 4 years. We now meet in cohort groups, and we call it FrameStat, where they are knowing what the left hand is doing. The public safety team, they meet together, the administration and finance team meet together. So, you know, you have these cohort groups that are meeting. They're getting a sense of what their colleagues are doing, but we're also solving challenges together. We're looking at each other's budgets. We're looking at each other's staffing. So we are on, you know, so when we come together to build a budget, it's okay, I see why so-and-so needs the resources they do. And it really has been wonderful, especially over the last 2 years. In the height of COVID, we were meeting sometimes daily to discuss what was happening with COVID in our city. And not once did anyone complain, and I mean every single day, Saturday, Sunday, to be able to discuss what we needed to do as a collective community to address COVID. So I have the utmost respect for the leaders that worked with me over the last 3 years. Some are still in Framingham, some have gone on to other things. I cannot say enough about their leadership and their professionalism during the entire time.
Well, that's a great comment to be able to share with those who were dedicated and worked really hard to make all of these initiatives happen and to try to be successful. But I would imagine that during a period like COVID, with this epidemic just taking a life of its own and taking lives at the same time, it must have been pretty frightening for you and your team.
You know, I think and that goes back to having a background in science and engineering and understanding systems thinking and understanding how to solve problems. And what is the problem? What do we need to do to address this? And then sometimes not even knowing what tools we have available to us. Early on, not having PPE, not understanding what this virus is, and learning very quickly. I certainly feel that I've learned enough that I could probably be an epidemiologist in my next life. But I am using the resources that we had available. Our public health department has been bar none. You know, I cannot say enough about the health department.
Well, it's the type of thing also that, you know, it's new and it's changing and evolving every day, and people are, even at the top, are learning about it as we go along. So the expertise is always being questioned because it's evolving, and that must be challenging because you don't get the buy-in from the public on everything.
Well, yes, and that's been going on, you know, even before testing, understanding about testing, then getting testing. I mean, Framingham was very fortunate. We were one of very few communities that had 2 testing sites, drive-through and a walk-up testing site. That was orchestrated and pulled together by working with, the Health and Human Services Division, our Public Health Department, working with our partners in our community that offered their space in order to have a drive-up testing site there. These are some of the critical things that made a difference during this pandemic, and that's why I always know you can't do this work alone. It is a collaborative effort. And it is something that we've done throughout this entire pandemic. And I am, when you ask the question about was there a frightening time for me, I think there was one period of time that I was extremely frightened, and that was seeing our older adults get infected and many pass away due to COVID, and not knowing what was going on in the facilities they were living in, and really trying to find answers. And we did that, and we were able to help and support our nursing homes, our assisted living facilities, and they were the first to get vaccinated. And that's one of the things that I'm really proud of right now, is that the vaccination rate of our older adults is way in the high 80s, low 90s right now.
Right. Well, some of those nursing homes and facilities are private, and they don't have to report to the government, the local government,
Right.
or do they? I mean,
No, they
were
don't.
they cooperative with you? Were there any emergencies that really stick out in your mind that were so hard to handle?
There were a couple that stuck out, and we demanded that we allow us to work with them to help solve the challenge. And and after some coaxing, they did, because once again they are state operated and supported. And they did. And once we were able to get into these nursing homes to look at their protocols, some of the things they were doing, and make some adjustments, things got much better in the assisted living and nursing home facilities.
Okay. Now, when you first became mayor and you walked in and had to get acclimated and kind of get a feel for how everything was running, you said you found some antiquated systems that were a little surprising. But what were some of the things that you discovered, that you were most surprised to find when you became mayor? Things that maybe you had to change, things that you had to fix, just things that you were really surprised to find?
I think there was a lot of fear of the staff. And once again, like any other organization, these folks have never worked with me. They don't know very much about me.
They were fearful of you coming in as the new mayor.
Exactly,
okay.
As the new mayor coming in, and what's going to happen with us and what's going to happen with our jobs. And yes, and we had to make some adjustments, and some things we changed in various departments, working with the division heads. But overall, I think nothing really surprised me, because once again, I had a bit of a history in this community.
Sure.
And and yes, the lack of diversity. I mean, that's something that really shocked me, that the lack of diversity in city government. People that worked in city government, they were very stark and telling that it did not reflect our community. And working with our HR director, our diversity coordinator, we were able to, and still are able to, make some adjustments in a way that makes good sense. We are also in a way to help educate our leaders, to empower them to be better, to know more about cultural diversity, to know more about excuse me, experiences of other groups of people.
Many private employers are required to try to hire people that reflect the community. They reflect the percentages of those various populations in the community. The local government is not required to do that?
It's not required, but we're doing a lot of deliberate effort around that in Framingham, and there is a policy, and working with division heads and those are hiring managers, to make sure that they are, when they put committees together, that the committees are reflective of a diverse group of people. Some of the advertising, where are you advertising for these jobs? Are you advertising in multiple sources?
Do you think people understand the value of having diversity at the table when decisions are being made?
I definitely think, and I purposely started with those in the leadership position and training them. And they've gone through, Dr. Burrows did a marvelous job going through a several session training for our senior leaders of diversity and inclusion, and why it is important, and how do you reflect it in our staffing.
And what would you say is the main takeaway when people are first learning why it's important?
Because if you are a community that is not valuing all of its people, and all of its people don't have a seat at the table, then what does that really tell us? How are we respecting and adding those voices to the conversation? And that's something, and the one test I often use with people, when I'm in a room, in a grouping, I look around the room and I see who's here. And then I look and say, who's not? And then it's our responsibility, whoever's conducting that meeting, to go and find those people who are not at that table.
And if they're not, to make sure that at least
Absolutely.
their concerns and needs are met or known. Knowing them and meeting them are two totally different things.
And there's a difference between knowing them and assuming that you know them.
Good point.
Yeah, no, because I think it's really important. It just brings up so many issues, even around the equity issue around COVID and vaccines and equitable access to testing and you know, the things that I learned throughout that whole process is that, great, we had all these wonderful testing sites all over Massachusetts, but could people get to them? The equity.
One was a drive-through,
Yeah.
so did you have a car where you could drive through?
Exactly.
Did you have a way to get to the walk-in? Yes. Yeah, those are
And-
good points. And if someone who doesn't have a car or someone who has that hurdle to get over isn't involved in the decision-making or the planning, then that consideration is probably not even raised during the discusure.
Right. Exactly.
to your point.
And it goes back to the training of our professional leaders. They were trained in how to spot those things. They were able to learn a set of skills. Like, oh my goodness, I never knew that I wasn't being inclusive.
This was the kind of training that was conducted by the
by our diversity, equity, and inclusion officer with our professional staff.
and now that person has left.
Yes.
Do you think that a new person will come in that position?
I hope so, because I think it's critically needed
Yes.
in our city of 72,323 people and counting, where the voices are not always heard. And the voices are silenced. And that still concerns me in Framingham, concerns me greatly. If we look at our history within any leadership roles and who's been in those roles, they certainly are not people that are reflective of the Framingham community.
What is some of the best advice that you've gotten since you've been mayor, and you know, how did it help you? Where did it come from?
You know, I get advice from so many different mentors that I've had over the years, and my mentors have, interestingly, a number have been men. But I think the thing that I have learned about leadership, it is not stagnant, and leaders grow other leaders. That's your purpose as a leader. And that's one of the things I've always prided myself on, is growing people. And I would say to my team, my job is to grow you out of this job, because that is my indication, giving you space to learn, to make mistakes, and to know that I'm going to give you that room to challenge me.
So is that the advice that you got, was to grow your people?
Yeah, grow my people, but also grow myself. Professional development is critically important. And
What was your best source of professional development?
once again, attending the professional organization, the U.S. Conference of Mayors, the Mass Municipal Mayors Association. We have monthly meetings to be able to meet in different locations and looking at various communities, whether I was traveling to Springfield to meet with the mayor of Springfield or going to New Bedford and seeing what the industry is there and some of the challenges and the successes. So it gave me a better perspective of our state, gave me a better perspective of our country, and especially nationally when I'm at the U.S. Conference of Mayors. I'm meeting mayors from around the world. And once again, another invaluable resource to be able to say, we don't have to reinvent the wheel. We can work together because someone has already done something that said, oh, well, you know what, this works. Yeah.
It's so much easier when you don't have to do it for the first time,
You're
when
right.
you can just take someone else's idea that's working well, right?
Right. Well, it's sort of like the African proverb here, you know, go alone, you know, don't go so far. But if you go together, it may take you a little bit long, but you're going with other people. You're moving with other people in the process. And that is something that has been tremendously valuable to me. You know, and the mayors that I've met here in the state, there are only about 40 mayors in the state of Massachusetts. And 351
municipalities,
right.
but only about 40 mayors.
Yes, right, in 40 cities And some of the mayors that I think we got really close, especially during COVID. There were times we were meeting 3-4 times a week, and I got to know a lot of them, not just mayors, but also some of the town managers, and forming a coalition of women who are either mayors or town managers here in the Metro West. I met with them regularly, and so those are the kinds of relationships, because there's what I call your affinity groups. Women mayors. There's a whole coalition of African American women mayors, and nationally. I'm the only one in the state of Massachusetts, but just knowing that there are certain conversations you can have with these cohort groups that supersedes other conversations, and there's different levels of experiences that are happening to women in leadership roles across this country, and especially women of color. And and I think I'd be remiss if I didn't mention that women have experienced a tremendous amount of backlash and vitriol behavior.
I was just reading that Michelle Wu, a newly elected mayor of Boston, is experiencing a lot of that right now, right after being elected.
Yeah, I sent her a note, and once again,
where's it coming from?
Well, it's coming. It's an interesting dynamic. Never in the history of this country have we've seen so many. First of all, so many women that I am very thrilled about stepping up to take leadership roles and to step into leadership roles. But it's also very threatening to the status quo. And part of that threat is, I'm all for your diversity and inclusion as long as it doesn't bump up against my privilege and power. And so there's a dynamic that is going on that we're losing power, losing control, so we will continue to rub and continue to be challenging that every step of the way. And I think Mayor Wu certainly understood coming into this job that there would be that kind of behavior. But also I think too, it is not incumbent upon her to solve it. It is for the others to say, no, this is not acceptable, and push back.
Yeah, that's people need to use their voices, right? And not
And
tolerate that kind of treatment of fellow human beings, no matter what gender, no matter what culture, no matter what color, just for people to be human and respectful, and demand that and expect that. Yes.
And that's something, and I think, unfortunately, nationwide, this is a challenge. Getting back to being respectful, being kind to people, and addressing the racist, antagonistic, misogynistic behavior. We have to keep addressing it.
So I feel that this is obviously not a short-term issue. This is an issue that's going to have to take. It's been taking years already, and it's going to take many more years. But do you feel that it's peaking at some point recently because of racial upheaval and gender inequities, that they're being highlighted, or that they're being exacerbated now by political interests? Or do you feel that this is the norm?
The moment we accept it as the norm, then we have given up. And it's a Baldwin quote where he talks about we can disagree until that disagreement is rooted in my oppression. And so that's the other thing too. It's really understanding what's a disagreeable situation, but what is a situation that is basically perpetuating a negative impact on one group of people or several groups of people that are the others. And that's one of the things we have to keep challenging ourselves on. If we truly, and I look at our community, and that's something I find so fascinating. If you ask the average person in Framingham, what do you love about Framingham? The first thing that they will say is the diversity of Framingham. That's often the first thing that they say. Okay, what does that mean? What does that mean to you?
And have you asked that question?
And I've asked.
And what kind of responses
and
do
oftentimes, it's very, peripheral. We have lots of different ethnic restaurants, and but think about this. this is my other test question. How often do you sit down to dinner and everybody around the table looks like you? Your table's not big enough. So think about who you have a meal with. So when someone says, I'm friends with so-and-so, well, have you had a meal with that person?
Is that a personal intention that needs to be exercised, or is that something that can be facilitated?
I think that's a personal intention, because if you are that person that says, I celebrate diversity within my community, I love being an advocate and an ally, then must demonstrate that. It has to be demonstrated. And it's not what you say, it's what you do that matters.
Yeah. Now, you've made a lot of decisions to help accommodate and foster increased diversity. Is that one of the decisions that you've taken heat for, or what are some of the decisions you've taken the most heat for?
Of course, I mean, it took me 3 years to get a diversity person from the onset. It was a challenge, and with the salary, I mean,
was that you that they just didn't want another, that it was another request and a give, or was it the issue of diversity?
I'm not quite sure what it is, but what I do know is that it was fought for multiple years, and yes, once it was approved, but the approved salary was far lower than what the industry standard was, and so really it was a denial by default, and and it was until we got to a place where salary was close to the modicum of the range. That we were able to attract and get someone in the position, and she hit the ground running, did a marvelous job, and I will say too that the incoming mayor-elect asked that these positions that are in my office be posted, so that was in order to make sure that she has an opportunity to take care of her family, made an alternative decision to seek employment elsewhere. So those are the kinds of places that I look at and I say, that should not have been a struggle, because we knew where the holes were. That was something that the transition team talked about, that not having this person in this role is critical.
There was a comment made, I'm a woman, I'm on the city council, I think we have enough diversity. You're a black woman and you're on the the mayor, I think we have enough diversity.
Yes. Well, what that said to me, and that was a statement that was addressed. I mean, as you probably have seen, I've had a number of very racist incidents happen within that city council chamber directed at me. And that was one that was directed at me, whereas, we've solved the diversity problem. We elected you to be mayor, and that just tells me how much work we still have to do. And how short-sighted that is, and really it was quite the ignorant statement too, and how it shows one's lack of experience and true compassion.
There's no manual on this.
Well, no, there is no manual, but you ask yourself too. Once again, it's sort of like what we learned in kindergarten. Would you like to be treated that way? Would you do that to? Would you like someone to do that to you, or whatever, or say that to you? And I think it's about being conscious and truly actively working on yourself and your own consciousness and your own behavior. Because we do a great job at lip service to things, but do we really invest in those things? And the same thing with your money. You invest in what you believe in.
So it sounds to me like that whole this experience in bringing on a diversity officer may have been one of your bigger disappointments, the challenge of getting that approved while you were mayor. But what were I want to ask about some of your biggest disappointments and some of your greatest accomplishments. What were some of them?
And once again, when you have no roadmap,
right?
You have zero roadmap, And nor did we as a city. We've never been a city before. So some of the basic things that I learned that one has in the mayor's office, like staffing. I went through a period of time of not being able to hire staff because that person didn't already exist on a classification plan. Well, we've never had this kind of a structure before. So,
right.
And that in itself took on a life of its own that really didn't need to, and really the focus should have been on how do we keep doing the work of running our city. I think, you know, the other issue is the budgets. Every year, the municipal budget has been cut. The budget is less than it was 3 years ago. And when you think about
say that again.
The
You're
budget's-
saying the actual dollar amount
the actual dollar amount
that's
of
spent on the municipal side.
but and I'll just take the mayor's office, and because the mayor's office is less than it was 4 years ago. You know, these are the kind, because systematically it has been cut. And then, you know, it's like 2 steps forward, 1 step back. You know, the diversity person is added, but a senior advisor eliminated, you know. So those are the kinds of things that have happened over the years. And then, you know, spending for, you know, other resources that we might need, that has been cut out of the budget. And, you know, and it is, and I think this year being the absolute most challenging is the literal elimination of 2 senior leader positions by the cutting of the funding for them. Mm-hmm. That was pretty tough.
Yeah, I would imagine. And what about some of your greatest accomplishments? What things do you feel that you're most proud of accomplishing as mayor?
You know, there's so many that I am very proud of. And, you know, the recent things, I mean, what I think about too that is going to have long-term lasting value in our community, you know, having a sustainability committee and working closely with the city council subcommittee led by Councilor Stuart Morales.
Sustainability for the environment.
Yes, and sustainability, and working closely with him to create the parameters for this subcommittee, creating the committee, getting it approved, and actually staffing that committee with residents in the city of Framingham. And we had so many talented people that applied. I mean, it was just very difficult.
Did that start with the sustainability coordinator that's actually in the charter? I mean, is there a sustainability coordinator
No,
in the charter?
it's not in the charter.
It's not in the charter. Okay.
No, it is. I did hire a sustainability coordinator. That was another thing that I'm pretty proud of, is that after doing a little research and looking at other communities, and we were able to hire a sustainability coordinator early on, you know, in my second year, and went on to now have this sustainability committee that is up and running and hitting the ground running to help guide our direction as we think about climate change, as we think about ways in which to make Framingham much more sustainable. And that's something I'm excited about. And the last act, which just happened, you know, the other night, was the final approval of the Women and Families Commission. And I have to say,
is it a commission?
Yeah, it is a commission. It
and
is.
What makes a commission differently?
Well, I think the commissions are charged with being able to make recommendations, and I think that is one of the key elements of this group.
To whom?
To the mayor.
Okay.
To the mayor, and you know, and one of the things that I want to see happen with this group is that first of all, the impetus for this is realizing who's suffered throughout the pandemic. It's been women and families. Women haven't been able to get back into the workforce. And so how do we rethink and think about women and what they're needing in order to make life different for them? And the other collaboration is with the Metro West Women Commission, also the statewide commission. I mean, many of these women have been engaged with other folks, and so we got a lot of great advice on how to formulate and really target the effort on Framingham. I'm excited about that. The commission was approved. I do know that some of the women who were part of the ad hoc committee wish to continue, and they live in our district. And I would love to be able to see that fully seated in being one of the early things happen in January, is that it gets fully seated. And part of what I also anticipate is that these women will be able to make some really good suggestions on spending ARPA money, being able to, our infrastructure money, because early childhood education is critically important, looking at ways in which we can retrain women to get back into the workforce. These are all issues that we're going to have to focus. Housing.
Are all the seats on that commission filled?
No.
So what is the process for anyone who wants to?
Well, right now, as we have done with all of the boards and commissions, is we advertise for them, and what we try for this particular commission, their representation from each one of our 9 districts. And so that is the hope. And quite frankly, even though there are women who served on the ad hoc committee from various districts, doesn't guarantee them that they will be in that seat.
Is this something that you've discussed during transition with the mayor-elect?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, I've talked about this.
And so you feel it will continue?
Yes, I hope it will continue.
Good.
Something tells me these women will kind of work very hard to ensure that it does continue. So I'm real proud of that.
Good.
And the Framingham Government Academy to engage our residents more in government. These are initiatives that we
not everyone is aware of what the Government Academy is.
Yeah, the Government Academy is actually it was about 10 weeks long, and that really focused on different divisions within our government, and having participants actually work with the leadership team, the staff in those different departments, where they actually
so
come for a
residents
session.
could apply to be a part of the academy.
Absolutely.
And to learn
and
how
for
city
free.
government
There
works.
is no cost to this at all.
And they got to learn how every single department works.
Yes.
And the people in those departments. How many classes went through?
Well, here's what happened. We started off with, before COVID, with in-person learning.
Right.
And we had people applied. In the first round, first cohort, we had about 25 people in the group, which was great. And then we said, well, can we do this online? We had to pivot to going online where people couldn't come, because we would have it in different locations. And our numbers grew significantly. We had over 50, it was over 50 people in the first cohort. So, that's something that I would love to see continue and to refine it a little bit more. And every time we did it, we learned something new. But as a result of that, we've found people said, wait a minute, I now get it. I can, I'd like to apply to be on this board or this commission, because they were informed and engaged. And that's one of the key things, is keeping people engaged.
When you decided to run for mayor again, what was behind that? Did you, I'm sure it was a disappointment that, and we talked about that a little bit in the beginning, but, was it to continue these efforts? Was it did you want to serve for 12 years, 8 years? Like, were you looking way into the future? What were your thoughts?
There was so much that we didn't get a chance to do, because once again, COVID dictated
which was
everything.
Halfway through your term.
Yeah, COVID dictated a whole lot of what needed to do, and that was really, how do I keep my community healthy and safe? And once again, I look at that and I said, reflecting back on it, we did a superb job doing that, and getting, right now, 76% of Framingham residents are fully vaccinated. And it's that other 24% I'm still working with, but looking at ways in which, we did what we thought was the best thing in order to keep people healthy and safe, even within City Hall, our staff, our public safety team, the notion of a whole a cohort group of firefighters getting COVID and having to be out, and the impact of that. And some of our neighbors, it's very dangerous. And some of our neighbors, had that kind of experience where,
in other towns.
Other towns, yes.
So they had.
So
no
we
one
had to provide service. Right. We had to help support them. So these are the kinds of things. We had to learn how to pivot. Work in cohort groups and really redesign our work environment in a way that met these needs of the community, but while keeping people healthy and safe.
Do you think that COVID is one of the main reasons why, looking at the state level, why Governor Baker's not running for re-election? It changes the role a lot, doesn't it?
Yeah, it does. It really does. And,
it takes you away from the business of the city and puts you into a whole other mode.
Well, and even the business of the city, I still had to attend to that. I think I would be understating it to say that this job is not 24/7. It is a 24/7 job, and the reality is that when you get that phone call at 3 o'clock in the morning from the police chief, you know something tragic has happened, and there is no going back to sleep. It's time to get up and address what is needed to be addressed. So, those are the kinds of things that we still continue to do. Trash still got picked up, snow was plowed, events happened to the best of our ability and as safe as we possibly could in the community. But the COVID definitely dominated a lot of attention. And so when I come back and say, what things do we still need to come back to? Economic development, it really goes back to the recovery, because we lost some ground because of COVID, and now we're saying, oh my goodness, we've got to not only recover, but how do we keep thriving? And that's the thing that clearly.
And looking at it differently, through a different lens, because the world has changed. The way we do things has changed. There's so much vacant office space or unused office space right now. Businesses are going virtual. We don't even know where it's all going to land. But people have to be able to adjust to the changes, and government has to do that as well.
Most definitely. And that's one of the things, too. If we are going to attract and retain our workforce, because if you look in most municipal agencies, and particularly government and city government, the workforce is aging, and who's going to be there to replace them? And today's workforce hey, wait a minute, we can work remotely, we can have some flexibility, and they want that. And that's going to have to be something to be considered.
And some jobs are easier done that way, and some
Absolutely.
are not. So it will make a difference as to which businesses go that way and which don't.
And when you start to think about salaries and pay for especially essential workers, we've got to remember we have to be competitive, or we lose workers, and as we have in our city, and being competitive is extremely important.
So when you've been in this transition period since the November election, what has been the transition process between you and the mayor-elect? How much have you communicated? How many times have you met? What kinds of things are you talking about? How is that process going?
It's been a little challenging, because I certainly have made sure that my office is available, staff is available, and to whatever degree that is necessary. I've tried to make office space available, but there has been limited conversation, and that's because there's a wealth of information that I could share, and different staff members can share that unfortunately within the next 3 days they're going to be out the door, and that information will be not conveyed. So Should
the public be worried?
I don't think anybody should be worried, but I'd say it's disheartening, because I know that when we were a town, there's certain protocol, but when you're the mayor, the buck stops with you. There is no other the selectman to confer with, or it's just you. There's no town manager to be the buffer. It's just you. And there's a lot of information and experiences that I could certainly be helpful. My staff can certainly be helpful, and willing to be as helpful as we possibly can. So it's not been as much as I would have liked, and as much as I've offered. So,
when the office of the presidency changes, there's a little letter that goes in the drawer. Is there anything like that that'll happen on the city side here?
We'll see. We'll see. We'll see how it works itself out. But I do wish the mayor-elect lots of luck and success in this role, because this is about our city. And for me, it has always been about Framingham. And every day that I make a decision, I am making a decision, and I say to myself, how does this benefit Framingham? So once again, this is not about a posturing, but it's more about, taking everything I have known and I've done to build something from the ground up.
And how do you get that out to the people? Because there seems to be a little bit of a vacuum between all the things that go into your decisions and what's going on in the administration, and then what the public actually knows.
Well, we can put out information, and it's how people choose to access the information. And I can't tell every event, every dollar that we've received in terms of grants. There's information that is talked about. It's put out there. It's a newsletter. It's a community conversation. It's a public coffees. I've done it all. I've done all of these ways to communicate to the public. And also look around. Just drive through our community. Look at Knobscott Plaza. that was blighted. Look at the other plaza at Mount Wait. Look where Framingham State Mass Bay is now going. Stuff is happening in our community that is really good for our community, and I'm real happy about that.
Mm-hmm. Did a lot of that happen through work with the legislative delegation as well?
I know with Mass Bay, definitely the work there, but also, looking at ways in which the Massachusetts Mass Works grant is funding the Knobscott intersection, that $3.4 million that comes from Mass Development grant that we received. And the only way that could have happened is making the decision to move that chapel off the corner in order to get that funding to be shovel ready and go from there. And so just recently, that whole plaza just sold to a developer. And what it was intended to, what it was approved for, is village zoning housing, and hopefully that will continue the process there at that intersection. And in a short period of time, we'll be looking at some new homes there and thriving businesses.
Mm-hmm. Now, after you leave office, mm-hmm. and in the near future, for the first time, the charter will come up for review.
Yes.
It's a 5-year wait, and then that's the first time that changes can be made to the charter. Do you have any suggestions in terms of what changes should be made to the charter?
Well, one of the things that I've tried very hard to do is to abide by the charter every step of the way, and not try to, interpret it myself, or, when in doubt, I always consulted with our city solicitor about tenets of the charter. And there have been some things that I've disagreed with, the changes that have been made to protocol, and I've been, very vocal about them because it is a charter change. I think there are a lot of pieces of the charter that they don't go far enough in explaining.
Like what?
The role of the mayor and the city council. I mean, this charter was written to have a strong mayor, which means that the mayor makes the decisions on a lot of issues, and not necessarily having to confer with the council on every single thing. There are certain things the mayor can do without the council and so forth. I think it's also important to look at the ways in which some of the boards and commissions, some of them, I think, they were good to have years ago when we were a town. Some of them, I'm not quite sure what purpose are they serving, because I feel that it's a duplicative process. Mm-hmm. For example, SIFOC and the Capitol Building Project, well, isn't that part of SIFOC's role to make recommendations? So, trying to examine some of those little things, nuances of the charter. The terms. One of the things that I think is real great in the charter, term limits. I do strongly believe that should be a tenet that stays there. Some of the other issues that we might need to look at, does it hurt us as a city? Does it help us as a city? And that's some of the things that I look at. And there are some things that are just, there's nothing in the charter about. There's, the administration and finance, it's a real comprehensive description of what needs to happen. Quite frankly, it spells out exactly where the budget is. It spells out exactly when the budget is due in the charter. Would it make sense to change that and have it due earlier? Yeah, probably would. Mm-hmm. But it's very clear in the charter, what the exact date that the budget is delivered to the city council. Mm-hmm. So those are the kinds of things that I think it needs to go over with a fine-tooth comb. I think some of the efforts were well intended, but no one really thought to the dynamics of the outcome.
Okay, so let's talk a little bit about you. Mm-hmm. Let's talk about Dr. Yvonne Spicer. We'll always be Mayor Spicer because you were the first for Framingham, and you'll always be the first, but you will no longer be in that role. So people are very curious about what you're going to do next, beyond taking a break and getting a little R&R. There's all kinds of things, ideas that people have floating around about what you might do next. What do you want to do next, and what are you thinking about?
You know, first of all, as you did say, R&R is important.
Well, you said you work 24/7, so for 4
I-
years
I-
that's a lot. But
I definitely
what's
know
next?
that whatever it is, it has to be guided into doing something helpful to others. It has to serve a greater purpose than me. And it has to have meaning for me. It has to have meaning. And so, you know, that's the other thing too. I'm open and receptive to a lot of ideas. You know, and someone asked the question, would you ever consider other political offices? Probably. You know, and other things. You know, as you know, I come from a academic background. I come from education, and you know, there could be something academic in my future, but you know, it certainly is something within leadership. I certainly like being in a leadership role. I like being able to work to build something new and exciting and interesting. And I'm capable of doing that, and so, you know, I have some possible options, but I go back to saying that, you know, I know when one door closes, another one opens. Mm-hmm. And my work may be done here for now, but that doesn't mean my work is done. Mm-hmm. There's other amazing opportunities out there for me, and I'm just going to see which one feels right for my spirit.
Is there a time frame, or is there anything you are actively pursuing?
No, there's no time frame. And that's the other thing too. I've never had to look for a job. It has always found me. And that's an interesting dynamic too, and including being the mayor of the city of Framingham. Mm-hmm. I didn't look for it; it found me. And you know, and I'm grateful for the opportunity. It has been one of the greatest honors of my lifetime to be the mayor of this city, and I've done my best. I brought the best I had to the table, and I'm proud of the results.
Any regrets?
None.
Will you,
even the difficult spaces.
Even in the difficult spaces.
Because, you know, the difficult spaces shows you really how strong you really are.
Will you stay involved in Framingham?
Of course.
In what ways?
You know, there are many ways that I can participate. You know, first of all, I go to my passion. And part of my passion is looking at women and also things that benefit children. You know, and there are a couple of things that I, you know, have done for the last several years, and oftentimes under the radar screen without the fanfare, to benefit girls and to help young girls of color. That's important to me, and I'll probably continue to do that. But, you know, I've also, through this pandemic, it has shown me a lot in some of the cracks in our community, and ways in which we can, you know, do a better job at filling those cracks. And I want to be able to continue to do that. You know, it's like it gave me great joy Christmas Day to be out delivering meals with the police department, and I've done that for the last couple of years, and you know, it's pretty heartwarming when you have someone, you know, like open their door and grateful and happy to see the mayor of Framingham, you know. So those are the things that continue to make me smile. We have a great community, and despite some of the challenges and despite you know, some of the difficulties, I believe in Framingham. I have tremendous hope.
You've done tremendous work. You've served the city well, and I want to thank you for your service as the mayor of Framingham and wish you the very best going forward in the future. And thank you for your time and for sharing your thoughts with us here today. And Mayor Spicer had amazing experience as Framingham's first mayor. Most importantly, she served the city with dignity and respect and integrity. And I want to thank you for that service and for being the first mayor of Framingham. And I want to thank all of you for tuning into the Audrey Hall Show, where you will always learn something new. Thank you.